Well, welcome everybody, and I hope everybody's having a good time getting ready for the holidays here. For those who joined late, Gene N3XUS just mentioned that he passed his general, so congrats to him. Okay, well, as I say, right now, I'm unable to reach our speaker because the phone number he gave us is not in service.
Yeah, Marty, question. Do
Yes,
you have, did he send you a PowerPoint or some presentation?
not to me, no.
Okay.
Normally they put it up themselves and then they send it to us afterward.
Yeah, okay. I was just thinking if he did, then, I have done, some of the CW Academy sessions as an instructor. So I could fill in if you have something like that.
Oh,
But
thanks,
it would
Alan.
be difficult to wing it if I have to
Yeah,
do it that
yeah.
way.
No, unfortunately, sometimes we have it ahead, but not this time. And you say usually it's after the fact. But thank you for the offer. Uh, you know, why don't we just take a couple of minutes? I'm not going to be able to stay too long here, but why don't we just take a couple of minutes? Maybe you can just tell folks a little bit about what you do with CW Academy, since that's the general topic for tonight.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. I mean, I was kind of in on the early days of the CW Academy. It's changed a little bit, since I kind of stopped doing that. But I think I was probably doing it for 2 or 3 years. I was doing beginner classes and basic classes. I never got into the intermediate or advanced classes, but it was always kind of a fun deal. And yeah, I highly recommend it. It's a different way of learning Morse code than when I was a novice back in the 1960s. Because way back then, we learned code at 5 words per minute,
Mm-hmm.
and we had novice licenses, and the novices then talked to other novices on the air and developed all kinds of bad habits. Not a good situation. When we got our general class licenses and got into the general bands, we were kind of laughed at, so to speak, if you can't do that in CW. But in any case, the CW Academy does things a little bit differently. Uh, when I went from 5 words a minute to what I had to do for passing the general exam, which was 13 words a minute, and then the extra class exam at 20 words a minute, so I had to relearn the code at each level. And so it's like starting from scratch all over again. What the Academy does is it starts everybody off at 20 words a minute,
Farnsworth
maybe
method.
even 25. What was the question?
Farnsworth method.
Yes.
Characters
And,
at
and that's the
20 and a
key.
lot of space.
Lots of space. So the average speed, might be 5 or even less than 5, as you start out. But you hear the tones at 20, 25 words per minute. So that's what sticks in your head. And as soon as you've got that basic uh, memorized, the letters and numbers memorized, then it's just a matter of practice. And you can reduce the spacing down to 0.
Mm.
And boom, you're operating at 20, 25 words a minute. Uh, and you can start making QSOs on the air. So that's the basic process of it. Now, if you take the beginner class, start off knowing absolutely nothing, not even memorizing the alphabet. It may take the full class before you've actually got the you know full alphabet and numbers memorized to the point where
What's the
you
typical
can start to do
duration
that.
of what you call a full class?
That's a good question. It's been a while, so I can't remember. I think it was 6 weeks.
Okay.
And there is if you go to the CW Ops website and click on the CW Academy stuff, all the information is there, and they have a pretty good week by week kind of a syllabus thing of what you go over. And there's a online practice program that you can get into. Again, I don't have that link or anything else because I wasn't prepared to do this, uh, but you can follow that, and it sets you up to practice for you and so forth. It's not something you need to take a class to do, but I think the class helps because you got peer pressure for you to keep doing the practices and not fall behind, and that's very
Ah, good.
important.
And Kathy put the link in the chat. Thank you, Kathy.
Great, yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Now,
Uh,
when I learned, I it wasn't even as a novice. I learned as the Boy Scouts, but we were using flags.
Yeah,
So
flags or
that was a
flashlights.
conversion.
Yeah, that's right. Uh, I would hesitate to even call it a conversion. It's a different kind of code.
Yeah.
Even if the dots and dashes are the same in the end, the way your mind works is it's a completely different process. So that, you know, the question comes up is, why should you have to relearn this thing over and over again to get yourself to be proficient? Let's start off with something that you can actually use.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the way it works. And it's amazingly well. I've had students, in my classes that progressed to, international competition standards. Uh, I was a competitor at WRTC a year and a half ago,
Mm.
and one of my students was one of the referees, not on my
Wow.
team, but for one of the other teams. I mean, he had progressed that far, uh, and he's in all the big contests now, and it's compared to me, a young kid, probably in his 40s or so, and he's fast. He gets the job done quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. One of our planning committee members, Steve Waterman, um, who is one of the founders of WinLink, and he's on the board, but um, he said, he came over one day, he said, how fast can you guys send? And well, Dick Norton's pretty fast, but he said he can copy solid at 60.
uh, good for him. I can't. So,
I can't either.
uh,
But yeah, it's amazing. Kate Hutton, K6HTN, is our section traffic manager. And, 10 years ago or so, she was not even a ham. And she, kept going and studying and then, she took the academy. And then next thing I know, I find her at a field day running the 20 CW station.
yeah, you can do that. I would say it would take probably a year, maybe go through 2 or 3 classes, get through the intermediate stage, and you're pretty much capable of having a nice rag chew on CW.
Yeah. One of my
They work quite
friends,
well.
I visited in Kenya. In fact, I was there for CQ Worldwide Phone. He just retired from the British embassy service, and he is one of their multilinguist code readers. And he can sit there and, he can read 70, type out 70 words a minute easily. I said, how the heck did you do that? He said, for 10 months straight, that's all we did, 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
So yeah, practice, 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 as they say.
Yeah, well, yeah, and different ways of doing things. I went through the Navy process
Uh-huh.
when I got. I got my novice when I was just barely in high school, probably a freshman, and got to the general the next year. But then I kind of dropped out, as I went through college, and this was back in that would be the early '70s. I got drafted, and in order to get out of the draft, I volunteered, quote unquote, volunteered
Yeah.
for the Navy. And during boot camp, they gave you various aptitude tests, and you might be good at this or that. So they did a few things, including they sent a few characters in Morse code. Did you know what that is? And I copied it down, and I said, yeah, obviously I know what that is. And they sent me to radio school,
Hmm.
and so I wound up teaching the class how to type because one of their instructors didn't make it. So I got turned into that kind of duty. And then they sent me to this intermediate Morse code school where literally we were sitting at a mill, typing away messages as they came from the tape, uh, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Wow.
And,
By the
there was
way,
little,
for those not familiar with the term, a mill is like a typewriter, but there's no shifts and it slashes the zeros and all that.
yes, it's kind of a nice character set. I kind of like it. And I use that, found something similar for my logger that I use here. So I
Yeah.
don't mix up zero and an O, when I look at something, it's
Oh boy, I
obvious.
did that. I did that once, and it cost me a few thousand points in a VHF contest.
I can imagine it would. Yeah, it's an easy mistake to make, especially since on the keyboard they're pretty close to each other.
Because it's a guy I worked him, a couple of hundred. I probably worked him 100 times over the course of the weekend in different roving spots. So
Yeah,
that was dumb.
you get it wrong every time, right? You make the
Oh
mistake
well,
once, and it pops up in the computer the
well,
same with the
it
same
was a
mistake.
copy and paste job to create a Cabrillo file,
Ah, yes, okay,
and I
got it.
was
Yeah, well,
copying from a corrupted call.
Yes. Got to be careful about things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, the Navy process was kind of like what I went through as a novice, because you start you off at something like 10 or 11 words a minute, and then as soon as you get a perfect copy, at that speed, then you jump it up to 12 words a minute, start all over again.
Hmm.
And when you get the perfect copy at 12, then you jump up to like 14 and start all over again. So this whole process, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It takes a lot of time. You have to relearn everything. Better just to start at 20, 25 and, practice that, get good at it. And lo and behold, slower stuff becomes easy.
Oh,
It's like automatic. You don't
yeah.
have to relearn it. It does take a little more practice to get faster, but that's just, more of the process. And that's fairly easy to do once you get on the air and actually start making QSOs.
Uh,
So that makes some sense.
oh, very good. Very good. Let's see if anybody has questions for you.
Tip of the hat to Alan, KH6ATU. I see you down there. I like the call sign. I'm KH6TU.
Yes. Notice
So,
the similarity.
and the same first name. So that's always a good thing too.
Yep.
Yeah, for some emails, I thought it was me, and they had put the wrong call sign on. Actually,
Yeah.
call sign from my uncle, who was a ham operator a long, long time ago, passed away, and when I became a ham operator, I just picked up his call sign.
Great.
Oh,
Well,
nice.
glad you did.
Carlos,
Yeah, that's good.
hand up.
What's that, Barry?
Carlos has his hand up.
Oh,
Yes,
okay,
hi.
Carlos. Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening to all. What is your preference? Long Island CW method or CW Academy method?
I'm not too familiar with what the Long Island guys do, but I have a feeling that they're very similar. It probably doesn't matter. I don't know if the Long Island group has Zoom classes that you can participate as a group. I've found that the Zoom classes really help a lot of people. Some people can do this on their own, but not too many, or can get to be very proficient at it. If you try to do it on your own, the problem that I've seen from other people is that it's easy to not practice. And then if you're in a class, you've got a class coming up on Thursday afternoon and you haven't been practicing, you get in there and do it so you don't, look bad in front of your classmates.
Yeah.
And that's a really good
We've had Long
motivator.
Island CW Academy on our RATPAC in the past, so somebody might want to go back, Carlos, and take a look at their presentation just to see what they do. But I know a lot of people have gone through CW Academy, and you have kind of a teacher, mentor, somebody to kind of keep you going. And as Alan said, that's probably a big chunk of it.
It is. I would say probably maybe a third of the class time that I would spend with the students was not talking about CW. It's about talking about what do you do on HF? How do you operate? What do they mean when they ask you for your QTH?
Yeah.
What are the CW abbreviations? I mean, that's a big one too. At the end of the beginner class, this is a 6-week class, so they maybe, in week 5 or 6, we actually do practice QSOs. That's taking somebody from absolute nothing to start with to actually, making a QSO, on Zoom between each other with a script. And it's amazing they can actually do it.
That's
and
great. Gene
get them on the air is the next step. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hello everybody on the net. I just wanted to ask a simple question. I have tried listening to CW letter for letter, number for number. What is the easiest way to associate the dits and dots with the associated letter or number?
Okay, yeah, excellent question. Boy Scouts, memorize dits and dots. CW Academy and probably the Long Island group too, forget the dits and dots. just listen to the character, listen to what it sounds like at speed, at 25, 20 words a minute, and get used to hearing that. Once we have this idea that or expression is called instant recognition, and that's what you strive for. You hear it, you know it. It's that fast.
And eventually it's going to be words that you recognize.
I've found that's not true. Maybe
No?
for some people. I've been doing this for 60 years. I can't do that. I hear of letters and numbers, and then I have to string them together in my head.
Well, some that are short and common. I mean, anybody who hears 7-3 will recognize it at any speed, probably.
Well, if I hear, it depends where we are in a conversation, but if I hear the 7, I know a 3 is coming.
Yeah.
If I hear a C, I know a Q is coming. It's that kind of a recognition. So I don't really hear the word. I just, I'm so familiar with the process that I can guess ahead. And the problem then becomes if I guess ahead wrong, then I get completely screwed up and I start losing track of what's coming next. That's a very common problem.
Okay, okay, so are you saying like, listening to the dot for like the letter A several times, then B several times, back to
Yes.
back?
Yeah, that's right.
The sound, because if you memorize the dits and das, or you associate with something that is going, at the end result is you are not going to develop a speed. That's the end result.
You
can learn
character.
code. You can learn code that way, memorizing characters or by association, but you are not going to be able to go above 10 words probably. Because that process,
that's how we learned in the beginning.
The process takes time, When you hear the sound, you make the association and your hand writes down the letter. That takes time.
Yeah,
So
and
if you want to be a fast CW operator, both receiving and transmitting, you can do that association in your mind.
Yeah.
That's my
not counting dits
cents.
and das at that point. You're listening to whole characters.
Yeah, you never listen to the dits and das. You just listen to a character, and that's, you either know it or you don't know it. And sometimes it takes a few seconds before that recognition comes across in your head. Dale, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention I tuned into this because I just went ahead and completed the beginner's course at CW Ops in October. My story might fit in with some others here. I got my novice ticket in 1972, and I learned code all the wrong ways. I've listened to tapes. I mean, I've gone through so many things I couldn't count them, and I got out of it. Life gets in your way and whatnot, and ratchet up 2014. I'm getting ready to retire. I says, hey, and I didn't even have a license at the time. I let it expire, and I went in and took my technician, my general, my extra, and said, boy, I'm back. I collect draped equipment, and so I got into the hobby again. But what I found out is that I played around a little bit with FT8 as on phone. I needed something else to help me grab some more DX, and there's that code that I hadn't used. I says, well, and I have some good friends in CW Ops. I says, there must be some way that'll work. In my career, I had to learn a foreign language, and there was a thing called the Pimsleur method, helps it gets it into your mind. I look at CW Ops that way, and I think it was Carlos that said it. When you use that Farnsworth, and it's 20. If you start out, mine was 25 and 5. That's what we started with in the beginners class. You don't hear it breaks the practice of counting the dits and das because it's too stinking fast for you to count them. It forces you to listen to the sound, and once you get past that, and it's hard. I had to unlearn all my mistakes. But it really resonated with me. I was at 25-12 when at the end of the beginner's class, but I'm not going to rush ahead. In January, I'll start the fundamental, and I'm going to work my way all the way through and see how far I can go with this thing. But I think the CW Ops is an excellent method, at least for me. And I'm old school and learned so many things wrong, but it worked for me.
Yeah, that's great. Good to hear.
The advantage of Farnsworth is that you learn to recognize the character or the number at the same speed always. When you go up in speed, you reduce the time between characters or numbers. But the sound of the character is always the same because it's always transmitted at a speed of 20 words or 25 words. If you learn at a speed of 10 words, when you go to 20 or 25, the character is going to sound totally different because it's faster. And
Yeah.
that's the
There's
advantage.
another,
That's the advantage of the Farnsworth method.
yeah, that's right. There's another aspect to this too. And that is, we have another rule in CW Academy is that put the pencil down. Don't copy, listen. We stress head copy, not writing it down. So you hear a C, okay, I got a C. Now I got a Q. Okay, now I got a Q. There's a space. Now you better start listening for a call sign. If you write it all down, you're concentrating on writing. You're not concentrating on listening. When I was in college, somebody told me that, if you want to do well in a class like history or something like that, don't take notes. If you take notes, you're not listening. They were not correct. I'm sorry to say, but
Yeah.
at least in CW, I agree with this particular philosophy that, don't write it down, just listen and, go with what you hear.
Very good. I see,
For contesting, you must write it
Oh.
down. So then how do you deal with that then, right?
Okay,
And
After-
people
this
this
is-
30 35 words a minute. I need to be able to write down the call sign and the exchange.
okay, I deal with that after the beginner class. This is something you start picking up, and maybe at the end of the beginner class or in the basic class, is that you're allowed to take notes. That's not the same as copy, like you would in the military, where you have to copy everything
Right. Okay. But
in
but
order.
in a contest, that's usually about the only thing that's sent.
Well, in some contests, that's very true. Yeah.
I have done a fair amount of CW contesting. I'm not one of the super fast guys like Steve Waterman, who's joined us now, by the way, I mentioned earlier. But I've done CQ Worldwide CW from quite a few places around the world, and what I find is, or same thing with sweepstakes, which is a great contest to practice on because it's a long exchange. But when I hear the call, I hear the call in Morse. I don't hear the letters. And if I'm sitting there, then I have to type it. I'm a slow typist, but I could just repeat what I heard in my head and put it down that way.
Yeah, that works too. This is the problem that I have personally, is I have a hard time going from one character to the next and figuring out what the word is without trying to guess ahead and getting the wrong word. Because if you guess ahead and get the wrong word, then you get all screwed up. You start missing 3 or 4 or 5 characters that come next because you're thinking about what that was that you missed, rather than just drop it and start listening again. That's a very difficult skill to have, but very worthwhile.
But as I say, I find that the more you get into the contest, the more that becomes less of a chore. And as I say, I love contests like sweepstakes because it's a nice long exchange, and you can anticipate the format. You know what piece of information is coming next. You just
Right.
don't know what the content. But if you know it's going to be a 2-digit year, or it's going to be a section name or something, you're ready for that.
Right.
So it's
right.
really good practice. Steve Waterman put something in chat about the one of the Wave Talkers classes. Steve, you want to jump in?
Well, I just wanted to comment on something here, talking about all of this process. Think about it as just another language. At some point, you stop thinking about when you're speaking, or even when you're writing text, you don't think about, well, let's see, T, H, I, N, K. Let's see, let's think. it becomes when you're driving, look at road signs. When you're whatever you're doing, just all the time, try to mimic in your head word or two here and a word or two there in Morse code. And when you're having a conversation, you don't think about the characters, each characters. You don't think about the words. You think about the subject matter. You think about the intent of the conversation, and it at some point, it depends on who you are and what you're doing. At some point, you forget about whether you write it down or don't write it down, or whether you're listening to determine what the characters are. Pretty soon, the words just come forth, just like they do with your call signs you were talking about. And it becomes just another language, another way to communicate. And it's harder to write it down. I mean, if you try to write down what I'm saying right now, you'd be lost. You just can't do it. So if it's a conversation, and not just a call sign and a swap of, uh, it makes a big difference at some point. It depends, like I say, that depends on who you are and what your capability is. The other thing is, I think it's important, is get on the air and make yourself make mistakes. Get on the air, uh, take the characters at 20 words a minute, even if you're going 10, and start spacing the characters closer together rather than increasing the speed and keeping the proper characters. I think that's the best way to increase speed. I'd say anything over 20 words a minute would be categorized. Could be categorized in as a language rather than uh, thinking about the characters and the words and what does an A sound like. Uh, you don't do that when you're just think about a conversation. You don't do that in a conversation. It's so familiar that you are worried about content. You're worried about intent of your speech and what the subject matter may be rather than how you say it. And that applies to me right now, unfortunately. Go ahead.
Very good, Steve. Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
You know, you mentioned the foreign language thing. It brought me back to my college days when I took a year of Japanese, and I by the last quarter, I found myself in the library going through a Japanese reader, all with hiragana and katakana and kanji, and I wasn't even stopping to translate it. I was just reading it as it was written, thinking in Japanese. And I can't do that anymore. But boy, 5 days a week, and you keep looking at this stuff, and pretty soon you stop trying to translate.
Right. The,
Right.
the the main point I think I'm trying to make is keep the characters fast and reduce the space in between them. If you have any way to reproduce Morse code, there's a free program that can go on a Windows computer that will work will actually work as a keyboard for CW on something like CW type with just a simple USB cable. It's called CW type. It's free, and you can use your computer volume. You can use the radio volume. If you put it in USB, it's not going to transmit, but you can take a 20 words a minute and take characters at 20 words a minute and put 5 spaces in between each character. The next time you do the same sentence, put three spaces in between each character, and before you know it, the recognition of characters and then words and then phrases and then experiences will all come together.
Very much. Let me break in a minute. Barry, I just made you host. My wife is home. I have to head out.
Okay.
But thank you guys all for coming. And Alan, thank you for your impromptu coverage of the subject. This has been great, and really glad you were joining us tonight.
Right. Okay, I'm putting in a URL for this the Morse code world. I put a space in there. It shouldn't have a space. Hang on a second. I'll get it up here.
I have
Great.
one
And
more question.
meanwhile,
there it
I'm
is.
gonna wish everybody happy holidays. Remember,
Marty, thank
RATPAC
you.
will be dark for the next 2 weeks. We'll be back on January 8th.
Thanks for
All
doing
right.
this tonight.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, Marty.
Absolutely. Everybody take care.
I have a question. Where does the Academy hang out on the air? Do they have particular spaces like 7029 or 7022 or
The Academy,
3529?
on the air type of stuff happens kind of anywhere. There's quite a few people taking the CW Academy classes who want to do it for summits on the air, parks on the air. So there's a lot of activity on those watering holes, but that's for those activities. There's no special watering hole, as it were, for CW Academy
Okay.
type people.
Okay.
Upper part of the CW band, where generally it's slower than the bottom part of the band, is probably a good idea. But that's all I could recommend.
Okay. Well, if anybody's interested, since I've been doing this since 1955 when I was 12 years old, 7035 to 7025, because that covers all license capabilities, is usually a pretty good place to learn this skill, in my opinion. Or 35 to 3525, or the same with 20 meters. And you will hear, when you don't hear CW, the bands are just void of it these days, unless there's a contest.
That's very true.
It used to be you couldn't find a frequency to call CQ on. Those days are long gone. And
Well, it's still true on Saturdays. That's because of the contest that's going on that particular day.
right.
But no, you're absolutely right.
You can
That's
also
right. Yeah, go ahead.
listen to the QST's ARL's code practice, where they actually send out articles from QST magazine and CW, and you can listen, and then you can go and see how you heard it afterwards, which is good training at various speeds too.
That's a
And
good
yeah.
idea, Barry. I've forgotten all about that.
Yeah.
Especially if you can sit there and just listen to it and follow the idea that's being presented in the text without having to write it down.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
that's the general goal.
Mm-hmm. And Carlos, you had a comment?
Yes, and don't forget to always answer a CQ or any type of call at the same speed they are sending to you, because you never know the skill of the other person, the other operator. And the same applies when transmitting. Never transmit faster than when you can actually copy, because the other part is going to send back at the same speed probably. And if you are not comfortable or capable of copying at that speed, that will be a big issue. So always keep your expectancy, your speed expectancies down to earth, both receiving and transmitting.
Good advice. Rich, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Barry Porter put CW type in here. That's good.
Rich, WB3EGD, you had a question, please. I guess not. Wait, Alan, what would you
Yes.
recommend for someone that's really starting out? Straight key, bug, how would you, what would you recommend?
Good question. I would not recommend, in fact, I would not allow in my classes any kind of straight key or bug. What I recommend is you get a decent iambic paddle and a keyer. And the reason for stressing the iambic paddle is because that's pretty much what everybody uses these days. And coupled with the fact that I can't use one. I grew up with a straight key. I grew up and then went to a bug for many years. I eventually got a keyer paddle, but it was a single lever thing. And I learned
That's the best.
that way. And so when somebody pushes a iambic keyer in front of me, I freeze up and I can't send with it. I found a trick. And then if I take a piece of paper and wad it up and jam it between the paddles, and then I can kind of get by. But it's better if you simply learn with an iambic paddle.
Okay. I know that a lot of places you could spend hours discussing that, but that's good. I'm pretty sure that if you can do an iambic paddle, you can do straight key easily.
Yes, absolutely.
Rick,
It-
are you wanting to
it
ask
is-
a question?
Excuse me, at a certain point, the iambic paddle stops where the single paddle can continue to get a little bit faster. If that makes any difference to people that are already pretty well moving along with their practice.
I think that's just a matter of practice with what you've got. Certainly a straight key can't go, as fast as any other
No,
type of
no,
key.
right.
So
Yeah, I'm talking
whether it's
about the
iambic or
difference.
straight or a single lever, I don't think there's a whole lot of difference there.
Single lever is just physically a lot easier to get up there than iambic for anybody,
I find it much
in
easier,
my
yes.
opinion. But
But-
there's
What
no
services
account
teach?
for taste.
The Navy teach straight keys. Did the Navy teach paddles?
What was the question?
Does the Navy teach straight key, or does the Navy teach bugs or iambic keys?
Well, the Navy doesn't teach CW anymore at all. But back in when I was doing it, like 1970 or so, it was straight key only,
Okay.
J38. In fact, since I had my extra ticket at the time that I got drafted, or at the time that I got my overseas assignment, I spent 3 years in the Philippines doing a little bit of CW and mostly RITI. But when I did my CW watch, I brought along an old Vibraplex bug that I happen to have from my general days. Took it with me. Figured, well, maybe I can use it. And so I took it out to work and plugged it in, and we were using it for a couple of weeks. And one of the other operators misadjusted it badly and went on the air with it. And it was so bad that somebody complained. And the chief came and took my bug away and locked it up, and he gave it back to me when I left the station. So straight key only.
Back in the early days when they had ship to shore common carriers, the only thing that was allowable were Vibraplex bugs, and those guys like RCA and Marconi and Globe Wireless, WLO, all those commercial applications use Vibraplex, and then they moved away from all of that and went to Cytor, of course, and then that ended that. But this just depends on people. People do what works for them and what's best for them on the ham bands.
Sure. And I think the vast majority of CW signals you hear today that are hand keyed and not computer keyed are going to be probably iambic. Not that they actually use the iambic features, but there's just so much of it out there that's what people use.
Yeah.
Rich, you have a question, and you figured out your muting. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question, please.
Thank you. Yes, my unmute is now working. And it's not a question, it was a response to, I believe it was a question Steve had regarding is there a CW Academy watering hole type of frequency. And although the answers given are accurate to the best of my knowledge, but there's kind of a backdoor way to find watering hole or watering holes, and that is some of the CW ops instructors have a program that they call Giving Back, and they publish a schedule of when they will be giving back and are open to contacts, just friendly non-contest contacts. I'm sure that schedule is published on the CW Academy website. And I don't know if there are actually specific frequencies noted or not, but the windows that were mentioned earlier you will probably be where to find them. And another way to find them is usually they're spotted on the clusters, the DX Summit or the DX cluster or whatever is your preference. So, for instance, my CW Academy instructor, K6RB, is in charge of that program. I believe he organized that Giving Back program for CW. And quite often he will be spotted and during his Giving Back sessions, as were other instructors as well. So that's one way to, in a non-contest setting, such as CWT, but in a non-CWT setting, you can find someone friendly to communicate with on CW from the CW Academy.
Yeah, that's very true. And yes, there should be a schedule on the website for doing that. I haven't looked at it recently.
All right, anybody else with any questions?
And if not, I'm going to have to take off. I've got some other stuff I got to do before it starts getting dark here.
Well, thank you for coming on and helping out.
Yeah, I'm glad I did. I really want to do more, sitting in more of these RATPAC sessions. This is pretty good. It's a great opportunity here.
Okay, and Carlos, you have your hand up.
Yes, I don't want to sound hard to the Vibroplex crowd or the Vibroplex lovers, but most operators using semi-automatic keys, they are poorly adjusted or adjusted wrong, and or they don't have the technique to properly manipulate a semi-automatic key or bug. What I mean by that is they adjust the pendulum for a string of dots that is too fast and they can't keep pace with the manual dash generation in order to maintain the correct 3-to-1 ratio. So on the air, when they try to send with a Vibroplex or any other type of bug, their sending is horrible. And most of the time it's very hard to copy because they are not maintaining the 3-to-1 dot dash ratio. At least
Carlos, they used to call
my
that
2 cents, and I don't want to harm or sound harsh to anyone. So sorry if you are a little bit uncomfortable with this comment.
That's what they used to call the banana boat swing, right?
That's the Lake
various
Area
things
swing.
of that. Lake area swing, yeah, and various things like that. It's called personality,
Right.
Which is kind of frowned on.
Yeah,
you don't find too much of that these days. Anyway, I got to run. So aloha to all.
Thank you very much, sir.
This is great.
my first introduction to CW was a Navy pilot who had a Navy flameproof strapped to his thigh. And while he was flying the plane, he was sending CW by tapping his thigh with the Navy flameproof. And I was so impressed with that. I still use a Navy flameproof keyer.
Yeah, that the gentleman was talking about one of these commercial operators. They had a lot of traffic and they wanted to go home, and you can only go so far on the dash side, so they would continue to increase the dit side where it was be way the ratio would be nowhere near 3-to-1 or 2.5-to-1. It was way higher, and then they would compensate for that by putting a filter choke in series and a big electrolytic capacitor in parallel with the cathode of the tube, and get a very bell sounding signal so that they could maintain some personality, whoever said that, and distinction. And that got into the amateur world and became ridiculous. So I know what Carlos is talking about there. But all of that is long gone, and so are the people that did it.
Like I said, everybody has a different way of doing it. People that do CW all the time can recognize operators just by the way they stand. It's called their fist. And people have a unique fist, each and every one of us. And it's almost like a personality, like you said. It's amazing.
Yeah, even on a keyboard, you can
Yep.
tell who it is. It's
Yep. All
yeah.
right. Is there anybody else that has any questions or comments? It's just about top of the hour. Well, thank you all for coming. And everybody have a good holiday couple of weeks and an interesting new year. And we'll be back at the turn of the year, 2025. My God.
Thank you,
All right.
Barry.
Thank you all for coming
Thank you. Happy holidays to all. Bye.
and stay safe.